year is 1996. Japan's video game industry is at the beginnings of a new console generation, with the Sony PlayStation that was released in 1994, and the Nintendo 64 was about to launch during June of that year. Then, there's the Sega Saturn, who was trying to run after PlayStation's gaining traction of being in the #1 spot. Sega had decided that the best course of action to combat the PlayStation's success was to generate interest in the Saturn by gaining some exclusive titles for the console. Unbeknownst to Sega at the time, a war was brewing in another company, a war that would strike with such ferocity and speed that its effects would ripple throughout Japan and gain the attention of both video gamers and the media alike. This is the story about the development and impact of Sakura Taisen, or otherwise known as Sakura Wars. The origins of this war date back as far as 1990, after author and game developer Teruhisa Hiroi, or otherwise known to the world as Oji Hiroi, saw a play production by the name of Shanghai Rhapsody, which was written by screenplay writer Ren Saito during the 1980s. During the performance, Hiroi became enamored and impressed by the acting troupe's performance that he decided to watch more plays, and wrote down some game story ideas that were being inspired by them. His initial ideas were focused on Japan's Showa period black market, or stories set before and during World War II. He decided that these ideas wouldn't work, since the Showa period has too much documentation to put it in a fantasy-like setting. He considered using the Meiji period, but it was scrapped as well because it wasn't the type of modern Japan Hiroi wanted for the story. He settled on using the Taisho period of Japan, because it was a time when Japan was integrating Western influences into the country, as well as various political changes like the emancipation for women. The Taisho era was also lacking in proper documentation about the era, in part due to the destruction that the Great Kanto earthquake did in 1923. So it was a good era to set a fantasy-like game. This era also relates to the reasons as to why Hiroi chose the main characters of the game to be women specifically, as Hiroi himself would explain.
Since there were many boy characters, it became a little out of fashion. So I thought it'd be cool if girl characters fought the battles. Also, the Taisho era was a period in Japan when girls became independent and were given the right to vote and so on. So I thought it'd be interesting to have a girl as the main character. That's how this started.
Hiroi would take these ideas to the video game company he worked at, Red Company, or Red Entertainment as it would be later known. The project started in 1993 and initially became known as simply Sakura. After a year in development, the team tried to pitch the game to several game publishers, but many didn't have confidence in the game selling well. Hiroi was forced to shelve the project, until a fateful phone call by Sega Japan's then Vice President, Shoichiro Irimajiri. Irimajiri told Hiroi that he desired to fill in Sega's first-party adventure game lineup for the Saturn, and was wondering if Hiroi and his team had any projects that could help fill this void, and compete with other games in the same genre. Hiroi was very dubious about working for Sega, since he had initially worked on other competing consoles like the PC Engine CD. Irimajiri then offered for Hiroi to come and think about the matter by taking a vacation with him to Saipan, alongside other developers contributing to Sega's cause. In Saipan, Hiroi immediately remembered his shelved Sakura project, and decided to tell Irimajiri about it, despite Hiroi's feelings of whether or not such an ambitious and unusual game would even be green-lighted in the first place. To Hiroi's surprise, Irimajiri was convinced to give the project the support it needed, and the two agreed on a collaboration between Sega and Red Company in order to bring it to fruition. With Sega now lending a hand to the project, Hiroi presented the team with a scroll of his handwritten calligraphy entitled Sakura, which became the basis of the tone for the newly revived project. For the art of the game, two specific people were brought in for help in character designs. Artist Kosuke Fujishima, who was working on the Ah My Goddess series at the time, and would work as the artist for the Tales of series, was asked to become the character artist for the main cast of the game. The project was in its early developmental stages at the time, which made Fujishima very hesitant on joining the project. His editors didn't want him tackling another project too, especially since he had a commitment to the Ah My Goddess manga. While trying to convince Fujishima to come over to the project, Red Company and Hiroi created several placeholder designs for the characters. Hiroi initially came up with several strong representative characters in response to Irimajiri's request of creating a new mascot character for the Saturn. he imitated some character archetypes that were usually found in typical high school manga, including a strong-willed gentlewoman named Sakura Saijo, a rival with negative first impressions, a cold leader, a cute and small character that becomes jealous of the other members, an athletic character, and an oddball character who wore glasses. A rough concept of the main male protagonist was also drawn up and given the name Kusaku Kanuma, who was originally a member of the Tokyo Police Department. After much pestering from Hiroi, Fujishima eventually caved in and joined the team in 1994, and found that the concept designs for the main cast were easy to work with. He created the final character designs based on them, with his first character to be completed being Sakura. The drawing of Sakura moved Hiroi to tears so much that the entire Sakura Wars team and Sega became convinced that Fujishima was the perfect character designer for the project. While Fujishima was in charge of designing the main cast, including Ike Yoneda and Ayame Fujieda, another character artist was in charge of the supporting characters. Hidenori Matsubara, who would later go on to work on the Neon Genesis Evangelion films, was brought in to help design supporting characters like the Wind Division's Yuri Sakakibara, Tsubaki Takamura, and Kasumi Fuji, alongside helping in some of the animations for the game. Considering that the game was in the Taisho period, Fujishima also took the liberty of mixing traditional Japanese clothing with Western accessories like shoes or boots, which allowed for the animators to animate female characters in ways they wouldn't usually be able to in traditional Japanese clothing. And taking inspiration from the Takarazuka Revue in the Hyogo Prefecture of Japan, the Flower Division's battle uniforms were modeled after tuxedos. Futoshi Nagata, who would become a storyboard artist for the original Resident Evil, became the designer for the Kobu armor, and worked alongside Neverland Company to create the in-game CGI cutscenes. While designing the Kobu, Nagata wanted to try and avoid using the trope of using future technology when designing the armor. He took his time to do some research on the second industrial revolution that happened between the late 19th and early 20th century, focusing solely on the United Kingdom aspect of the era. He received some photos of 1920s steam-powered trains, as well as early versions of diving suits, and these pictures gave him the inspiration for how the Kobu would look like. For the music department, Hiroi knew exactly who he had to bring into the project. Earlier in 1993, he was working on an OVA, or original video animation, based on the Japanese PC Engine role-playing game Tengai Makyo Ziraya. The music composer for the OVA was a man named Kohei Tanaka, known for being one of the composers for the One Piece series, and even arranged the opening and ending songs of the original Dragon Ball series. Hiroi became highly impressed with the music he would compose for the animation, and this impression would set Tanaka to come and compose the music for Sakura Wars later on. When he started composing for the music for the game in 1995, he came up with a plan to use the theme of the game's setting and merge that with his own goals of creating a soundtrack unlike anything he's composed before. It led to music that would be inspired by the popular music of the 1920s, while mixing it with modern 1990 music styles, such as jazz, rumba, and samba. He initially wanted to create 50 tracks. However, this was beyond both the budget and development time of the game, so they would cut it down to 24, then just to 7 tracks. With Hiroi being pretty upset by these cuts, Tanaka took it upon himself to ask others in the development team how many tracks he could make without going over budget or time. What he was told was that one CD's worth of music tracks should be enough, and chose 12 tracks from the list of 50 he had initially created. For the vocal tracks, Hiroi was put in charge of creating lines for the songs, despite his repeated protests that he was not a professional lyricist. Tanaka would help his friend out, becoming a mentor of sorts for Hiroi, and sent him to karaoke sessions, telling him to study the works of famous Japanese songwriter Yu Aku, and to buy old records of vintage songs. These lessons from Tanaka took about 2 months before Hiroi felt competent enough to write lyrics for the songs. The main theme of Sakura Wars, Geki Teikoku ga Gekidan, was composed with Hiroi's instructions of combining a Super Sentai opening with the vocal style of the first song in the 1949 movie, Oi Sen Miyaku, and was completed in a short amount of time. With music production in full gear, Hiroi turned his attention to getting the people that would sing and voice the characters of the game. While deciding on the cast for the characters, Hiroi realized that he needed voice actors that could act and sing the musical numbers he and Tanaka were making. Hiroi took this into account by requiring voice actors to have experience in both singing and live stage performances. His staff members recommended some notable voice actors, and Hiroi would take it upon himself to personally approach each voice actress before telling them anything about the game. Mayumi Tanaka was chosen to play the character of Kana Kirishima based on her ability to play comedic handsome men archetypes in kabuki plays. She is also known to be the voice of Krillin and Yajirobe in the Dragon Ball series, Monkey D. Luffy in One Piece, and Mega Man Volnut in Mega Man Legends. The character of Kuran Lee was voiced by Yuriko Fujisaki, as recommended by Fujishima. She was approached in 1995 when the recordings for the opening and ending themes of the game were still being planned. Fujisaki is notable for having voiced Kaori from Akira and Megumi Morisato from Ah My Goddess. Urara Takano was offered to voice Maria Tachibana after performing at a concert. Hidori decided to cast Takano after he was told by Sakura's voice actress, Chisa Yokoyama, that she had positive working relations with her. Takano became intrigued by Hidori's description of Maria's character and decided to join the project. She is known for being the voice of Raichu in the Pokemon series, Illumi Zoldyck in Hunter x Hunter, and Francis Drake in the Fate series. During the Christmas season in 1994, Hidori went to another concert to find the voice actress for Sumire Kanzaki at the recommendation of a friend. After witnessing her performance on stage, Hidori became impressed by Michiya Tomizawa's performance and would be offered the role to voice Sumire. Tomizawa is known for her role as Rei Hino, otherwise known as Sailor Mars in Sailor Moon, as well as Jenna Angel from the Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Saga series. Kumiko Nishihara has an interesting tidbit about her voicing Iris Chateaubriand. She was originally cast to voice Sakura Saijo, later renamed to Sakura Shinguji. However, after Yokoyama heard her lines, she suggested switching roles with her, and it stuck. Nishihara is known for voicing Diana in the Sailor Moon series, as well as Rene from the Legend of Heroes series. And, as previously stated, Chisa Yokoyama was originally cast to play Iris, but switched to Sakura after Nishihara was brought on. Hidori wished to create a compelling death blow line, and thought that Yokoyama's voice fitted perfectly for the delivery. Yokoyama herself was used to portraying strong characters, and it was hard for her to voice Sakura due to the voice direction for her being a normal girl. Besides Sakura Shinguji, Yokoyama is known for being the voice of Sasami Masaki Jirai and Tsunami in the Tenchi Muyo series, Lacriza Noin in Mobile Suit Gundam Wing, and Maria Renard in Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And finally, protagonist Kusaku Kanuma, who would later be changed to Ichiro Ogami, was voiced by Akio Tsuyama. Hidori was looking for a voice actor for Ogami, and Tsuyama just happened to be working part-time at Red Company while training as a voice actor. Due to the amount of money he had to use after hiring the other voice actors, Hidori had a very limited budget and didn't exactly know who to hire. After hearing this issue, Tsuyama confronted Hidori about being the voice actor for Ogami, even though Tsuyama himself didn't have a reputable or sizable resume in voice acting at the time. Despite this, and the fact that Hidori was running out of both money and time, he hired Tsuyama to play Ogami, making him the last voice actor to be casted for the main characters. After Ogami, Tsuyama is known for being the voice of Hugo in Attack on Titan, Hisaru in Final Fantasy X and X-2, and Zagi in Tales of Vesperia. Once the group was gathered into one recording studio, only then were they given a description of the project, and given pictures of their respective characters. The recordings were overseen by Toshio Sato, and Hidori specifically requested that the voices had to sound as if they were real people. Sato was also completely shocked to learn that the 4 books he received was just 1/3 of the game's entire script. Because most of the character portraits in the game were static, Sato directed the voices with the intent of being the main emotional force of the game. Sato also decided that Sakura would be the last main character to be voiced, to try and figure out how to bring out her heroine status, and portray the testy relationship between her and Sumire. Hidori turned his attention to the actual game development by this point, as many of the team members were getting distracted. Early in the development of the game, the team created 2 tabletop role-playing games respectively named Sakura 1 and Sakura 2. Because everyone liked playing the game so much, Hidori's team decided to shift focus of the game to be on tactical combat gameplay and storytelling, similar to games like Fire Emblem. This shift was also most likely due to the team and Hidori thinking that the game was starting to turn into a game centered on the interaction with attractive girls, otherwise known as a Bishoujo game. This frustration led to the development of a system where choices in conversations were timed to make the game more interactive. The LIPS, or the Live Interactive Picture System, was created with the intent of forcing players to make real-time decisions in tense situations. The system turned conversations into battles that needed to be won, as a character's trust would raise or lower depending on the answer of a player. The trust system, as it would be later called, allowed the developers to incorporate the simulation elements of the game with the removal of regular role-playing mechanics like experience points. It proved quite controversial for those who wanted an experience point system, and even director Tomoyuki Ito said it took a lot of trial and error to get it right. For the writing of the game, Hidori finally convinced author and screenwriter Satoru Akahori to come and write the main script and storyline for the game. While Hiroi was an author himself, he felt that his writing style wouldn't be enough to entertain audiences, as the setting of the game revolved around family-type stories. When Akahori first came onto the project, all that Hiroi knew for sure was that the story would include young girls and mechs. This troubled Akahori, as he had never written a story for a video game before, and was not sure how or where to even start. Hiroi told him to just write it as if it was an anime television series, to the point where Akahori included the regular anime television tropes of "Next time on Sakura Wars" and the title of the next chapter at the end of the scripts. Akahori also took Hiroi's initial ideas of Kusaku Kanuma and morphed them into his own main character of a soldier in the Japanese military that befriends everyone in the Imperial Assault Troop, and renamed him to the now known name of Ichiro Ogami. By the time he finished writing out the entire game's story, a 13-chapter script was made, with the final story segment being across 3 chapters. But after the staff talked with him about how big the story was, he condensed the final story segment to 1 chapter, with the new total chapters of the game being 10. With the general story done, it was now up to writers Ryoma Kaneko and Naoki Morita, who would write the later Sakura Wars games, to flesh out the world, edit the script, and create additional dialogue. The game took about 3 years to develop, which was nearly double the original estimated development time. The lengthy development time could be blamed on the unusual developmental process of the game itself, as the Sega division of the project was having problems. Due to the conflicting gameplay elements, they had to split the game into 2 different teams within the Sega team, and they were never able to test each other's gameplay effectively, till near the end of development. Production of the game became difficult throughout the entire process, and, according to Sega, it became their most expensive project ever at the time. It didn't help either that Hiroi insisted on delaying the game for several months in order to include as much voice acting as possible, which stretched the game from being a single disc to a double disc game. The game was originally supposed to be released by April 1996, but Hiroi's new demands would delay the game, putting pressure on the development team to scramble and complete it as fast as possible, with some working long hours and pulling all-nighters. Leading up to its release, it was placed as one of the top 5 most anticipated games list on the September 6, 1996 issue of Famitsu, just behind games such as Fighting Vipers on the Sega Saturn, and even the acclaimed Final Fantasy VII on the original PlayStation. After a few more months, the team was able to pull it together, and the game was released on September 27, 1996. Despite several staff members being dubious about the game even selling in the first place, sales numbers shattered those expectations. Hiroi had promised to Sega that the game would sell at least 200,000 units in a few months. What actually happened was that it flew off the shelves of Japanese game stores within hours of its release, and sales numbers by Famitsu indicated that the game sold 205,270 copies, which was about 57% of Sega's entire stock of the game by the first week alone. Sakura Wars was also rated highly by Famitsu and Sega Saturn Magazine, with Famitsu giving it a 33 out of 40, and Sega Saturn Magazine giving it an 8.33 out of 10. And at the very first Sessa Awards in 1996, which would later turn into the Japan Game Awards, the game would receive the Grand Award, as well as several categorical awards for the Best Director, Best Main Character, and Best Supporting Characters. So what makes this game so notable? Well, the release of Sakura Wars was an unprecedented success for both Red Entertainment and Sega as a whole. Its release helped establish a new beloved Sega franchise in Japan, and the character of Sakura Shinguji has been one of Sega's shining mascots in Japan since the game's release. To keep fans ripe with Sakura Wars fever until the second game came out, Sega also went into an advertising and promotional frenzy, the likes which haven't been seen since the days of Sonic the Hedgehog. Released in 1997 for the Saturn, Sega had its first spin-off Sakura Wars game named Hanagumi Taisen Koramusu, or Hanagumi Taisen Columns. Essentially, this was the Sega puzzle game Columns with a Sakura Wars twist. The game allowed you to play as one of the members of the Flower Division, and adds the ability to attack your opponents at certain intervals, with characters shouting their iconic special attack quotes from the original game. The Column spin-off became so popular that it would later receive a sequel in 2000, based on the second Sakura Wars game. Sega also took Sakura Wars into new territory when, in 1997, a stage show called Sakura Taisen Kaiou Show went into production, and, with the supervision of Hiroi himself, included all of the original cast coming back to reprise their roles in the play. This play would eventually grow to become a full-out theater troupe, with many voice actors of the later games being added in as the years went by. The original run of the show was supposed to end in 2007, but the support from fans has managed to keep the theater troupe alive, and they are still running shows, one of the most recent being one that played in 2021. A 4-episode OVA of Sakura Wars was aired in 1997 all across Japan, and focused on giving more context into how the Imperial Flower Division was formed before the events of the game. A 25-episode anime series based on the original game was also produced and released in Japan in 2000, as part of the Sakura Taisen 2000 project, which was an effort to push the franchise into the new millennium. Though, it's important to note that the anime did change some aspects of the story when they transitioned the game's story into the anime series. Hiroi also took it upon himself to write a Sakura Wars manga series, first released in 2003. However, the OVA, anime, and manga series are much more important than you might think. Anime distribution company ADV Films, who are known to be the ones who brought Neon Genesis Evangelion to Western audiences, acquired the rights to the anime and several OVAs of the Sakura Wars series, and distributed them to their North American and European divisions. This became the first official taste of anything in the Sakura Wars series outside of Japan, which was a major influence in starting a loyal cult following of the series in the US and Europe. Many old Western Sakura Wars fans would exclaim that they became familiar with the series through the anime and OVAs. The manga of the game would also come to the West as Sakura Taisen, later in 2005 via publisher Tokyopop, giving the West a better look at the characters and lore of the series. Meanwhile in Japan, the franchise pushed on into other territories with the opening of a Sakura Wars themed shop. Located in the Ikebukuro district in Tokyo, the Sakura Taisen Taisho Romando opened among the various shops and malls in 1998. This shop held tons upon tons of Sakura Wars merchandise, ranging from wall-out to full-out collectible dolls. In 2003, the shop expanded its walls and created a cafe that offered various Sakura Wars themed drinks, like Sakura Soda or Sumire Tea, and foods such as Sakura-themed onigiri and iris tarts. You'll also find a lot of Sakura Wars-inspired props while you eat, including life-size statues of the characters, and a Kobu statue in the cafe area. Unfortunately, the cafe has closed since March of 2008, but remnants of the shop still look around on the web, such as the various merchandise, and even an archive of the old cafe website. The love of the game and series itself became such a phenomenon that it was very influential in boosting the sales numbers in both Sega Saturn hardware and software. In early 1996, Sega of Japan reported that they had sold about 2.2 million Saturns. By November 8th of that year, that number jumped to 3.7 million. On April 4th, 1998, the sequel to Sakura Wars named Sakura Taisen 2 Kimi Shinitamo Koto Nakare, or Sakura Wars 2 Thou Shalt Not Die, was released. In its first week alone, the game sold 355,270 copies, or about 70% of Sega's stock of the game, and Famitsu says that 501,066 copies of the game were sold in the first half of the year, making the game one of the top 10 best-selling games in Japan at the time. The game would go on to sell just over 509,000 copies, making it one of the top 5 best-selling Sega Saturn games of all time in Japan. The Nintendo 64, which had also been released by this point in time, would also never catch up to the sales numbers of the Saturn in both hardware and software releases in Japan during its heyday. And while Sega doesn't make consoles anymore, the game and series has continued to gain new audiences in the years to come. On July 1st, 2002, the press and game distributors of Sega were invited to the Grand Prince Hotel Akasaka in Tokyo. Inside one of the meeting rooms of the hotel, Oji Hiroi, Koei Tanaka, and Sega of Japan's COO Tetsuya Kayama announced the start of the Sakura Taisen World Project. This project was aimed at bringing more awareness to the series, and although several games were announced at this meeting, including 3 cancelled games, I'd like to focus on 2 that either connect with the first game or what I believe are notable games in the series' history. Firstly, a remake of the first game named Sakura Taisen Atsuki Chisho ni, or Sakura Wars in Hot Blood, was released on the PS2 in 2002. The point of this game was to introduce the series to a new audience, with a newly developed LIP system and a new strategy RPG system named the Active and Real-Time Machine System, or ARMS for short, was implemented from the third game. The game also had all new story chapters not seen in the original Saturn game, with all of the original voice actors coming back to reprise their roles. With a small but vocal Western Sakura Wars fan base advocating for the localization of the series for several years at this point, the Sakura Taisen World Project had also hoped to bring the series to a worldwide audience. That isn't to say that the Sakura Taisen team did not try to bring it over, as a Western localization effort of the original game by Sega was halted during the concept approval process as indicated by Silicon Era. Officially, it was unknown why it was halted in the first place. However, according to the former president of now defunct video game publisher Working Designs, Victor Ireland, on NeoGAF forums, It's said that Working Designs had also tried their hand at porting the game after Sony had dropped translating the PSP port of the first two games. However, internal Sega politics had prevented them from going ahead with this plan. Despite the Sakura Taisen World project aiming for this journey to the west, Sakura Wars in Hot Blood was not the game that made that jump. Instead, another game in the series did. In 2005, the fifth game in the Sakura Wars series named Sakura Taisen 5 Sabara Itoshiki Hitoyo was released in Japan, with Hidori stating that the game would be localized for a Western release. After 5 years and in collaboration with NIS America and Idea Factory, 2010 saw the release of Sakura Wars, So Long My Love, in both the US and Europe, the first official Sakura Wars game to be released to Western audiences. Not only that, in part thanks to the extra help by Idea Factory, the game came out on both the PlayStation 2 and Nintendo Wii in both countries. The first and currently sole mainline Sakura Wars game to be released on a Nintendo home console. Despite the high-praising reviews from critics, So Long My Love was deemed as a failure sales numbers-wise, and besides a Nintendo DS spin-off game that was released in Japan, the series went into a dormant state for several years with no talks of another mainline game. That isn't to say that Sega would totally forget about the series during this time, as games like Project X Zone and X Zone 2 featured various playable Sakura Wars characters, and Sakura Wars collaboration events were available on various mobile games, such as Grand Blue Fantasy or Star Ocean Anamnesis for a certain amount of time. Even Phantasy Star Online 2 had a Sakura Taisen collaboration event in Japan in 2016. By 2018 though, major talks about the series started to stir on the internet. Firstly, an English fan translation of the original Saturn game was announced in May by Nsteam on Twitter. Secondly, Sega announced its own return to the franchise when they announced a new project named Shin Sakura Taisen, or New Sakura Wars, at Sega Fest in April. By 2019, with the combined efforts of Nsteam, CJ Iwakura, and many others, the fan translation of the original Saturn game was fully finished and released online, finally giving English fans the chance to play the original Saturn game in their language. In that same year in Japan, Sega also released Shin Sakura Taisen for the PS4, an action RPG reboot of the franchise with full 3D cutscenes, and a new cast of characters, with some familiar faces, for a generation of Sakura Wars fans, both new and old to meet. In 2020, the game was released to the West as just Sakura Wars, dropping new from the title. As of the making of this video, we don't know the worldwide sales numbers, but Famitsu estimates the game has about 178,426 physical copies, and 24,577 digital copies sold in Japan, which is a total of 203,003 copies of the game sold in Japan altogether as of 2020. The game would go on to win the Future Division Award at the 2019 Japan Game Expo, and also has an anime series that continues after the events of the game. A play production based on the game named Shin Sakura Taisen The Stage was also produced and ran from November 19 to the 23 in 2020, with another production happening on March 21st, 2021, and there are plans to continue the play during the winter 2021 season. The development team of the game has taken into consideration reviving or localizing any previous Sakura Wars games with great interest, and a mobile Sakura Wars game named Sakura Kakumei, or Sakura Revolution, was released on iOS and Android devices in Japan in December 2020. Unfortunately, the phone game was shut down on July 20, 2021, but there are current efforts of archiving aspects surrounding the game being made. In terms of what has happened with the franchise currently as of the making of this video, Japan has gone on to hold a Sakura Wars 25th anniversary concert on July 28, 2021, that was led by Koei Tanaka himself, and PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, otherwise known as PUBG, announced a crossover event with Sakura Wars on July 29, 2021. As for Western fans, the collaboration event for Phantasy Star Online 2 was released to the West during 2020, and a fan translation of the second Sakura Wars Columns game on the Dreamcast was released on May 2, 2021. Sakura Wars also has the reputation of being the starting point of various Sega franchises and games, as team members moved on to their own projects. During the year 2000, Skies of Arcadia was released for the Sega Dreamcast, and the developers included some of the members of previous Sakura Wars games, namely Shuntaro Tanaka. Tanaka became the director for Skies of Arcadia after being the scenario writer for the first two Sakura Wars games, and Skies of Arcadia itself would eventually gain high praise from various reviewers all around the world, becoming a classic for Dreamcast owners, and currently, many fans and even developers still hope for a sequel to the game sometime in the future. Though, Skies of Arcadia wouldn't be the only game Tanaka and his team would work on. 2008 saw the release of the first Valkyria Chronicles game on the PlayStation 3, and was mostly created by the same team. The game has won multiple awards, and became recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records as the best RPG on the PS3. The game became a big hit for Sega, and it eventually spawned games on various consoles, most notably the PSP and the PS4. The series is still going strong with the latest game at this time, that being Valkyria Chronicles 4, was released in 2018. It would go on to be nominated at the 2018 Game Awards as a candidate for the Best Strategy Game of the Year, and has sold 1 million copies as of June 2020. It's safe to say that the Sakura War hasn't stopped since it set Japan ablaze in 1996. It was deemed a weird and ambitious project that wouldn't sell well, and it subverted all expectations that even its creator wasn't sure how well it would do. The ripple effects of Sakura Wars can be felt throughout history, from helping keep the Sega Saturn afloat in Japan during its heyday, to the impacts of today with the founding and revitalization of a series, a worldwide loyal fanbase, and the spawning of other successful games and franchises. The game has various amounts of importance in Sega's history, and I can only hope that the fierce war between the Imperial Flower Division and demons will be remembered for years to come. These were the archive files of Sakura Wars, and my name's Ninfan237. I'll see you guys next time. Hey, thanks for watching the video. First and foremost, if you like this video, then please give it a like, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, then subscribe and ring that notification bell. And feel free to comment in the comments about, well, if you liked the video, or you found it interesting, or like, you know, should I even like show, or maybe some suggestions for like a new archive, another archive video, another archive files video in the future. Secondly, I have to give a very big special thanks to Samantha Ferreira for help in this video. Her Twitter is right next to me, as you can tell. She is basically the biggest Western Sakura Wars fan on the web that I know of personally. And she helped me in this research, and she helped me in the research of this video by literally giving me access to her entire digital archive. Now, obviously, I can't give that link. In the description because that her digital archive belongs to her, obviously. But I just want to give her a very big shout out, as she helped me in this video, and she gave me a lot of stuff that I would have never found myself, such as the NHK interview with OG Hiroi. That, as far as I know, as far as I know, I could have not found in public, as well as stuff like a clean rip of footage of the Taisho Romando, as well as like other stuff like finding Victor Ireland's NeoGAF form. I would have probably never found that because that was a post before I even knew what Sakura Wars was. So very big special thanks to her. I have to also mention that she's also the editor-in-chief and founder of both the Anime Herald and the Combat Revue, which are the Anime Herald is like an anime, they cover a bunch of like anime stuff. They cover a bunch of anime stuff ranging from anime conventions to legit just talking about like old series from like anime in the 90s, and just like a bunch of articles about anime. So if you're interested in that, I have a link to the website in the description. And the Combat Revue is basically a place where you can get caught up on basically the latest news of anything related to the Sakura Wars. So I will leave a link to that in the description as well. And Samantha, I believe, is also the lead in the Sakura Kakume, or Sakura Revolution archive efforts. So yeah, please go check out her Twitter and leave a follow. She also actually does some Sakura Wars panels at several anime expos, including I believe the latest one she did was at OtakuCon. I haven't been to any of them personally, mostly because they're kind of I can't really travel because you know, pandemic, and it's kind of like not even, it's not like, let me just say I'm nowhere near like where these conventions are being held, where she's actually like having these panels. But there was a panel that was actually recorded of one of her latest one of her panels was actually recorded digitally because it was a digital event. So I will leave a link in the description for one of her panels if you want to go check out her panel, as she does cover a lot more in-depth stuff that I pretty much skimmed over, such as the anime, as well as the manga, and a bunch of other stuff. So please feel free to go check that out in the link in the description. As well as I have to give another thanks to the Taisho Cafe Discord for answering my question about the about old Sakura Wars fans. As far as I know, they're probably the biggest active Discord for Sakura Wars fans, and every Wednesday night they host like they show various Sakura Wars plays, some of which are fully fan translated. I'll leave a link for the website in the description where you can find a invite to their Discord if you're interested. As well as the usuals, if you like to follow me and keep up with whatever I'm doing, my Twitter, there's my Twitter, at NameFan237. As well as if you like this video a lot and you want to help support the channel, like improve the quality and maybe even getting props like the Sakura Wars Saturn and actual game that you see in this video, there'll be a donation page down in the description. My voice cracked. That's good. And I will say that this series, the archive files, will not be a consistent uploaded series, unlike beta files. I don't really have a set schedule, or I don't think there's gonna be a set schedule for this episode. It's more or less gonna be like whenever I like have the idea of like whenever I'm able to actually like figure out like what I want to actually do for another archive files video. I will say that the next video might be either on the Virtual Boy or the Nintendo 64, depending on several factors, including if I'm able to actually get a Virtual Boy, because I need an actual Virtual Boy to do that video, but I currently don't have one because they are expensive. I mean, just look at those prices. But anyways, I just hit my mic. That's good. Anyways, that should be about it. So, my name's NameFan237. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.